Good evening and thank you for joining us. Thunder Bay Police are investigating an auto-pedestrian collision which sent one person to hospital with serious injuries. It happened just after 4 o'clock this morning near the corner of John Street and Ray Boulevard. When police arrived, they found an injured man on the roadway. Paramedics transported the victim to hospital and the motorist who was involved remained at the scene. The area was blocked off to traffic for much of the day while police investigated, and the streets reopened around 1 o'clock this afternoon. The victim remains in hospital with unknown but serious injuries. Anyone who witnessed the collision or has any other information about it is asked to contact City Police. Meanwhile, Thunder Bay Police have now arrested a woman suspected in a recent armed robbery involving what appeared to be a handgun. It happened in the morning of July 21st at the Circle K store on the corner of Waterloo and Wall Streets. The suspect entered the store carrying a disposable plastic bag. Surveillance video showed her approach the counter, pull a gun out of the bag, point it towards the clerk, and make demands for money. The suspect then fled on foot with an undisclosed amount of cash. City police say a 24-year-old Thunder Bay woman was arrested yesterday. Police also confiscated a replica handgun believed to have been used in the incident. The woman is facing charges of robbery using a firearm, disguised with intent, and pointing a firearm. She remains in custody with her next court date on Tuesday. Well, after weeks of planning and preparation, part of the Marina Park pedestrian overpass was lifted from its supports with a crane this afternoon. The big restoration job is being carried out by Tom Jones Construction, which first built and installed the overpass in 1994. The shorter section, which is closer to the Prince Arthur Hotel, was removed first and then lowered down to the parking lot below. The crane lift was delayed from mid-morning until the late afternoon as the anchor bolts which hold the overpass in place were rusted and could not be removed, so a welding crew was brought in to cut them. City project engineer Mike Vogrig says the second half of the overpass will be removed by next week.
Starting about Monday of next week, just to give them time and some flexibility, we'll be closing down this one section of road. So pedestrians and traffic will have to take slight detours up Red River Road or down Camelot in order to kind of get around the area. That closure will likely be in place for the week, but then after that it'll open up again back to 2 lanes or 4 lanes of traffic. So they still have some removals of glass over the railway tracks that they're completing right now on the second section that has to get lifted. So that'll be ongoing this week and continue on into next week until they're ready to lift.
After the needed repairs, repainting, and testing, the overpass is expected to be lifted back into place in late September or early October. The price tag for the project is $1.3 million. Ontario is reporting 95 new COVID-19 cases today, making it the 4th straight day with fewer than 100 new infections. But the Ford government is still facing calls to revise the province's back-to-school plan. However, the Premier continues to stand firm. Colin DeMello has more.
It's the latest group to voice concerns with Ontario's back-to-school plan. The unions representing thousands of educators in Toronto say they are uneasy about COVID-19 in schools.
Incredibly anxious about their own health, about the health of the people that they go home to.
The Ford government announced that elementary schools will largely look the same as they did before the pandemic, along with regular class sizes, which unions argue put educators at a higher risk.
It is our position that the employer, under the law, is responsible for providing a healthy and safe work environment.
The Ford government has been reluctant to reduce elementary class sizes, despite signaling support for the idea.
Do we all want smaller classes? 100%. But I think the plan is phenomenal.
So unions are now calling on the province's largest school board, the TDSB, to take the lead and separate students into groups of 15. Which the board says would cost roughly $250 million.
The funds are not there. If the province was to provide the funding for this, we support this.
The province already set aside $80 million for urban school boards for additional staff if needed, part of an over $300 million back-to-school fund.
So you have to understand that's $300 million for the entire province. We are about 12% of the province, so the most we're going to get of that is about 12%. So that is not enough funding.
And amid all of the criticism, the Premier today acknowledged one important fact.
Let's be very clear. We have full control over the plan. And yes, I do pray to God no one ever gets hurt.
a plan that's facing increasing scrutiny over whether students will be kept safe.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu offered up her thoughts to local media today regarding her government securing deals with 2 coronavirus vaccine candidates. While the news is exciting, Hajdu says it's only the beginning of a long process. Avery McCrae has more.
Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu says the securement of 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines is exciting, but it's only step 1 of a multi-step process. Wednesday, the Trudeau government announced deals with pharmaceutical firms Pfizer and Moderna to secure millions of doses of the vaccines each company is currently developing. Hajdu says this won't be the only 2 deals the government will secure, as its COVID vaccine task force is looking over all their available options and negotiating with many potential vaccine companies. Hajdu notes the importance on the ability to secure potential vaccines sooner rather than later.
The Canadians expect us to be aggressive in this space and to be able to procure vaccines when they become available. Of course, then we'll have our own challenges domestically to determine the prioritization of who gets the vaccine here in Canada. And the Vaccine Task Force will help us with those decisions as well. For example, should it be frontline workers and people with vulnerable health conditions, older people, children? Those are the kinds of the decisions that will go into the deliberation. Those are the decisions that the task force will deliberate and will help us decide when the time comes.
Another decision looming for the federal government is the potential closure extension of the border between Canada and the United States. The border is set to tentatively reopen for land travel on August 21st. But with the U.S. still reporting over 50,000 new cases a day, it has many Canadians uneager to reopen the border at any point in 2020. Hajdu says it's tough to predict when the border will reopen, as many variables will have to be taken into consideration.
Very, very difficult when we really can't predict what's going to happen with a particular country's outbreak from week to week in some cases. So I think we'll have to just play it by ear, and I know that's frustrating for people to not be able to project into the future what their lives might look like from a travel perspective, but unfortunately it really rests in the hands of the amazing researchers and scientists globally who are trying to find a way out for all of us.
Avery McCrae, TBT News.
The Thunder Bay District Social Services Board has reopened 10 of its daycare and early on centers. The move comes after the province released new rules for the operation of child care centers late last month. The revised guidelines increase the cohort size from 10 people per room to 15 and mandate a new screening process and new guidelines if someone exhibits COVID-19 symptoms. The reopenings have allowed the DSAB to provide daycare spaces for about 150 children, but that number is expected to rise with further openings in August and in September.
Well, good news is we're starting to get back to a little bit more normal. Normal is going to be a little different than it was pre-COVID. Where it stands today, we have 10 daycares that are open throughout the district and another 6 that are planned in August. But now with the recent announcement from the Premier that all daycares can open and get back into more normal operations, that's a good step for many families and parents, especially with the reopening of schools.
The centers run by the DSAB have the capacity to care for up to 2,600 kids, and Ranta expects them to get back up to that number eventually. Well, Thunder Bay NHLer Carter Hutton held his annual charity golf event this afternoon, this time with a matchup inspired by Tiger and Phil. COVID-19 forced the usual tournament to be canceled, so instead the Buffalo Sabres goalie and a close friend faced off against Rock 94's Kel Wanzik and local pro Evan DeGrazia. Corey Nordstrom has more from the fundraiser that supports the George Jeffrey Children's Foundation.
Local pro Evan DeGrazia led off the Scrabble-formatted tournament, paired with Rock 94's Kel Wanzik. Event host Carter Hutton and golf partner Chris Unick could feel the heat from the 25-year-old early on.
Yeah, you know, you always think he's going to be good, and then you see him, and he's better than you expected. So I think we're in trouble, but we're going to have fun, that's for sure.
Couldn't believe that they had Evan DeGrazia available for this number one. But he took me out to the driving range earlier this week. We got some practice in.
This is Hutton's 5th year hosting the Hometown Heroes golf event for the George Jeffrey Children's Foundation. The Buffalo Sabres goalie is now a father himself and says even though they had to make adjustments to the tournament, it was something that he wanted to make happen.
To have a center like this in my own hometown that helps so many people, and for me, I feel blessed to be able just to be part of it. And I think everyone that's involved in this charity does a lot of work. And, at times I feel like I get a lot of praise for being, the face of it, helping out. But there's so many things that go on behind the scenes. And, for me, I'm just fortunate to be able to come out and spend some time to help out.
And raising money was at the forefront of the fun event, with the golfers' scores playing a role. Jones Insurance pledged $200 for an eagle and $100 per birdie, meaning concentration was needed.
Get in the hole.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
Is that good?
Oh yeah!
$100. $100. Pay up, Jones.
In the end, Kale and DeGrazia were victorious by just a single stroke at 6 under par, managing 2 eagles and 2 birdies, with Hutton and Unick picking up 6 birdies. That, in part, led to Hutton's tournament surpassing its goal, raising more than $27,000 for kids with disabilities. Corey Nordstrom, TVT News.
Over 27,000